This episode is brought to you by Thor's Ice Cream, the best ice cream menu in Billingham. Find them at the rink on game days and pick from their range of amazing desserts including the Biscoff brownie and the famous whippy trays, with a choice of amazing toppings. Supporters of the Stars and Buccaneers and proud partners of STARCAST. Find Thor's Ice Cream on social media.
This is STARCAST, the official podcast of the Billingham Stars. Watch and listen for the latest news from the Big Red Machine.
Hello and welcome to a very special, I think this is our first bonus episode of STARCAST, the official podcast from the Billingham Town Council, Billingham Stars. Podcast team back to full strength. Delighted to have Carol back, and Jono is here as well again. Evening to you both.
Evening.
Looking forward to this one, a very special pod. When is it never interesting around British hockey, but some interesting things going on around the governance and the management of British ice hockey, and we've got a very special guest to talk about it. So a good one to get on with tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all people have been talking about the last 2 or 3 weeks is we're at a unification vote again after the failure of the last one, and I think fans are eager and keen to see what happens and where we go from here.
Yeah. Well, as we do on STARCAST, we don't muck around. We'll just go straight to the top, and we're delighted to be joined the Chief Executive of Ice Hockey UK and England Ice Hockey. A welcome to STARCAST for Henry Staelens. Henry, thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
Evening. Thanks very much for having me.
Pleasure is all ours. As I kind of said, almost flippantly, it's always a very busy time and an important time around British ice hockey, it seems. Can you just give us a quick précis of where we're currently at and how we got to this position as we stand now?
Yeah, I mean, you guys will remember the last attempt of this. I think we're in a very different place now, and the proposal is very different because of where we are now compared to where the sport was then in terms of maybe some of the personalities or the way it was approached. But yeah, I mean, I've been in the sport now for 3 years. Day one, I looked at it and thought, why is there 3 governing bodies when we don't get much public funding compared to other sports? And we've got 3 people doing the same job. We've got 3 technology systems. And it's quite obvious to me and pretty much everyone I've spoken to in the sport that money would be far better spent in the places that matter to members. So in junior development, in clubs, in safeguarding, in growing our commercial base to put back into the sport. So it was an obvious outcome for me. But I understand why it failed last time. And I think this time we're proposing something different because of the status we're all at now.
Yeah. Well, as obviously you're aware, it's a members' decision. Obviously, Billingham as a club are a member of England Ice Hockey. So our listeners and our viewers and viewers around the NIHL would be interested to know how it's going to affect. So to that effect, if we're okay, Carol, you can kick us off. Get started with Henry on board.
Yeah, okay. I've got just a couple of questions for people who might not know a great deal about yourself, Henry, because obviously we're third tier of British hockey, and sometimes our little bubble doesn't extend too far beyond that. So I was just interested if you could tell us, you've kind of come from a career in football, and you became the CEO of Ice Hockey UK, nearly 3 years ago now. What drew you to ice hockey in the first place, and how has your experience in other sports shaped your approach to leading our national body?
Yeah, good question, Carol. And firstly, I understand what you mean by little bubble. I think the Big Red Machine that you guys have created is like you are doing a lot with that little bubble. So I just want to say that genuinely really impressive. I think coming from outside the sport, there might be a lot of people that think he doesn't understand hockey, and I would never profess to understand hockey anywhere near as well as anyone that's been in the game and watches the game, plays the game, volunteers the game. But that's not my job. I understand football to a certain extent, but I couldn't coach a team or talk tactics, and that's not really why I'm interested in ice hockey. I mean, coming from outside the sport, like I've seen how other organizations operate, good ones and bad. Football, for its sins, is still the biggest sport in the country. It receives the most funding. It's got the highest levels of professionalism and all that stuff. And so I've got a view of how organizations can run. And before that, I had my own business in media and comms, which grew really well, and I sold that. So I came into the sport because I guess I left school at 16. So I've since that age, I've always been had the underdog mentality. So I've always sort of I guess gravitated towards underdogs. My football job was with the smallest club that's ever played in the Professional Football League, ultimate underdog. On top of that, our chairman was the most devout vegan you've ever met. So it was a vegan football club, made it even more of an underdog. And everything we did was 100% sustainable. And we weren't exactly preaching to the choir in football. We were the weirdos, but we turned that into something very special in terms of profitability, in terms of on-field performance, and in terms of general interest from outside of just football. And so when I saw the ice hockey role, it had a similar feel. Like, this sport is seen as like niche and an underdog, but actually, like, we estimate around about 2 million people are buying tickets every year. There's about 1.3 at the Elite League, which everyone knows. But then if you start to calculate, the NHL 1 and 2, NHL, SNL, the Women's League, and GB games on home ice, you start to get near 2 million, which makes us probably one of the top 3 most watched league sports in the country. And still people come to me and say, "Oh, you're the CEO of ice hockey, that's niche." And it's like, I went through a stage of explaining it, and I get to a point now, it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I've always liked the underdog. I've always thought ice hockey doesn't need to be bigger. I just think it needs to be broader to be respected more. I think that's what ice hockey deserves. So I think ice hockey's done very well catering to its current audience. But if we broaden the base, which is why we brought in things like the NHL Street program, and we start knocking down some of these barriers and these perceptions that there's not enough ice time, it's too expensive, it's too hard to learn, it's only for certain communities, I think the sport will get the respect it deserves. And with that, commerciality will follow, and that will only benefit clubs, because I think in the past, a lot of the money's gone to the top and not much has come back down. And that's not how it should be. For me, the money should come in at the top and trickle down, because then you create more players. Obviously, you've got a brilliant junior program as an example, and obviously some alumni like Robert Dowd. We want you to produce 10 Robert Dowds, not one. We want Sheffield to produce 3 Liam Kirks, not one. So it's like, we have to invest in the base of the game, and we can't do that with the way we're currently set up, because every other sport in the Olympic space, if you look at the funding awards, they're on the UK Sport website. Some sports receive 30 times as much as us, and then they get Sport England funding as well for grassroots and participation. Now, to do that, we have to be seen as less niche, and we have to be seen as having a viable plan to produce players that can play at the Olympics. And in the past, the World Championships have always been the focus, and they will remain a focus, but we have to have a view on every 4 years. Financially, we have to be budgeted every 4 years, and we also have to be looking at player development. So we should be looking now at 2030. How old are those players now? Where are they? And you would have seen with our recent selection for Poland, when I started, it was mooted that no player from the NIHL would ever get selected, and I thought that was absolutely wrong. I understood the reason behind it, because their conditioning might not be as good as, you can't go straight from playing an NIHL game to playing Canada, which is kind of what we're asking of those players. But we should definitely start exposing them to the GB environment and giving them a chance. And even if we went to Poland last month and got beat 7-0 in every game, but we found 3 players that stood out and showed that they can operate at that level, they have got the potential, that to me would have been a win. So the fact they went out there and performed that well and ran Italy close, who are getting Olympic funding right now, Poland as well, and Slovenia was it was the first game together, it was a given. So yeah, there's a long answer, Carol, but hopefully there's something in there that explains it.
Oh, that's quite all right. If Craig's all right, I've got a kind of a continuation question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So late 80s, early 90s, for those people old enough to remember, obviously not me, she says. That was kind of seen as our golden moment in the sun. When, you know, we ice hockey regularly on grandstand, etc., etc. The governing body structure was a lot different. And we've gone through so much change since then, and we kind of maybe lost that golden moment along the way for various reasons. But this merger vote that's approaching, you've already touched on some of the key benefits that you see from unifying. I just wondered if you had a plan to address any potential concerns from members, because obviously this didn't get through last time. And I think that if I just listen to grassroots fans, I think the will is there from the fans, and you look around the social media groups, and this is kind of what we want. But I am aware that it didn't get through last time, and I just wondered if there was a plan to kind of address those concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I'd always do it anyway, but appearing on podcasts like this, you guys have got a good reach. You're doing really good work, and I think we should be as transparent, as open as possible. From the day I walked in, I've overused Twitter. I've tomorrow I'll open the door to the office, and it's last minute, but that's because we've changed the schedule. But if anyone wants to come in negatively, critically with ideas, we've got a dedicated email address for it. We've held a bunch of virtual town halls and in-person meetings over the last month, and yeah, I'm very open. I think I've got no history in the sport. There's no personality conflicts. There's no bias from me. That's clear. And I would always ask people, and I ask this in every single meeting I have, by the way. I'll probably ask you at the end if we don't get to it. I'm sure we will before that. If there is a concern, I would love to know the specific concern. I will address it, because honestly, I've been looking at this for nearly 3 years. There is only wins in this, and that's the only reason I want to approach it. It's not some mergers are the big bad wolf swallows up the others and everything goes to GB. This is completely the opposite. This is if we were to start ice hockey today, would it look like it does now? Would it have mainly volunteers with very little office support? Would it have absolutely no public funding for kids' participation and elevating clubs? No, it wouldn't. So I think I always say, if people think that the way the sport is now is perfect, then vote no. If they have more trust in the leadership now and the governance standards we've set and the strategies we've put out, then it's definitely worth taking a leap of faith, because I don't think we've shown any reason why we can't do that. And that's one of the reasons I took on the CEO role of England as well as ice hockey. It wasn't for my mental or physical health. It was because I wanted to show that if you collaborate properly across organizations with shared services, it doesn't need to cost more, but you get at least some alignment. I don't want to get into corporate jargon, but everyone understands, obviously, if you're the CEO of the elite stuff and the talent is right below that, everything should join up. Because otherwise there's a disconnect and you lose kids from the sport, parents get frustrated, and that for me is wrong. We don't want to lose anyone from the sport, because it's such a brilliant sport for people to be in and around. And a lot of times people just walk away from the sport because either it's too expensive or they get frustrated with how it's run.
Yeah. I mean, that too expensive thing, you mentioned it earlier, the NHL, the street hockey is going to be huge in that regard, isn't it?
Yeah, and the NHL plays a number of factors. It does cause us some issues as well, but they're issues we have to address at some point. The issue that I'm talking about is ice time or ice availability. Probably a better way to put it. If 30,000 kids touch a hockey stick for the first time, and we believe 8 to 12% will convert into members each year, that's brilliant for the sport, because it obviously shows a broadening of the base. More people than ever before want to play it, but then it's where are they going to play? But I'd much rather have that problem, because what that allows us to do is to be going to Sport England and Sport Scotland and Sport Northern Ireland as a collective and saying, look, we've got 3,000 kids every year signing up, and you still won't build any ice for us. And that's when it becomes a government issue. And at that point, they will invest in more facilities like they do for other sports. The problem is, at the moment, when we say we've got, I don't know, a growth of 200 members a year, that for the cost of an ice facility, they don't see the bang for their buck. But we need to show that there is a unrelenting demand for this sport, and that we're partnered with brands like the NHL, which even those outside of ice hockey understand. Yeah,
no, that was exciting when it came around. Jono, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, a bit of a loaded one, but more from the level that we're at with the Billingham Stars. It's where my priority always is. So hopefully the vote goes the way we all want it. I think a lot of us were devastated it never went through last time. Lots of whys and all that sort of stuff. So why now will this one work? Why will this bid be more successful than the last one? And if and when it does go through, how will it benefit us at the Billingham Stars?
Okay, yeah. So firstly, I mean, I don't know it will go through. I think that's the key, right? The only thing I will say is we did an AGM, obviously, for England ice hockey a couple of months ago, September or something, and we did a dummy vote on that. And that was mainly just to get our house in order to make sure that we knew and everyone knew who is the voting members, because there's been some confusion about that 5 years ago as well. So we've done all the due diligence on that. We know who the voting members are. We make sure that everyone gets the right level of voice within this vote. And on that vote, it was overall 100% in favour, right? It was only a dummy vote, so it didn't mean as much, but it showed that what we believe is true, that everyone does want to see the sport move forward. Now, the problem we might have, and I am conscious of this, is are we over communicating? Does it feel like we're trying to force it? Because we're not trying to force it, but we want to make sure that everyone's fully communicated with. The last thing we want to do is get to the vote and people say they didn't have an opportunity to ask questions. So we're trying to put out as much information as possible. It might be a bit boring if you see a post every day, but like we've got nothing to hide in this. We want to share as much as possible that we can at this point. So that's why I hope it goes through, because I've not found a single negative about this. I've not had anyone even raise a single negative with me yet. But the risk is always that people don't turn up and vote because they think it will just go through anyway. And it's a bit like, and I absolutely hate politics, by the way, but it's a bit like politics, like when don't just believe the Conservative or Labour are going to get in, but you have to turn up and vote. They always bang on about it, and I just think, but it's true. In this, and it's such an important thing that, especially those that vote yes, by the way, should absolutely turn up and vote or do their proxy. I appreciate it takes a bit of time, but this is such a big step. And then what happens after that, Jono, is, and this is where it affects Billingham directly, we will spend 12 months, and this is all funded by UK Sport, by the way. UK Sport are so keen to see us merge, and so is Sport England, that they are paying the lion's share of the legal costs, which is phenomenal. They're not doing that for any other sport. We'll be the first sport to do it. They see what they don't want to be investing in three bodies in one sport. It's not financially viable for them either. They want to see us much more streamlined, working as a sport. So they're going to help us with the legal costs. And so for those 12 months, Jono, we will basically consult with all members on how this sport looks. Now, the reason that we don't have all that detail now is we set those 5 guiding principles, and we're also putting out 3 promises, one around referees that we've already released, one around DOPS, and one around member voice. Okay. We will stick to those 5 principles and those 3 promises, but actually the detail in it will be figured out with the members, and it will always stick with those guiding principles. If we veer away from those guiding principles, it goes back to a merger vote, but we won't, because we've spent that much time understanding what the sport needs and what we can deliver with this. So I think in terms of detail, like that's where in the past maybe members haven't felt fully consulted or fully heard, but that's a lot of the way it's because we're set up and we're led by mostly volunteers over the recent history. If you've got paid accountable people, like where you guys work full time, I'm sure there's paid accountable people like yourselves. Like that's how organizations run. And we're the 5th biggest team sport governing body in the country. The 4 above us get anywhere between 200 million and 1 billion a year in public funding. We receive 220, and that's only for GB. Like, so we are operating on a shoestring. We don't need to operate like that. So I think there's enough money in ice hockey to make it work. It's just badly spent.
Yeah. You want to follow on that, Jono?
Yeah. Well, it's probably more into the playing of the game, and as a hockey fan as a whole, I pay attention to everything that goes around the world, and we've seen big changes in Europe and how they do things, and the DEL's gone from absolute nothing to everything that it is now, to producing NHLers for fun and being a competitive Olympic side. Italy reduced import quotas massively. I think Austria and I think Czech have gone the same way. I think Poland have gone the same way very recently. how is it we're going to catch up to these nations, especially like the DEL? They don't have a massive league. It's probably, 8 to 10 teams like we are. But the size of their arenas, the money involved there is probably tenfold to what it is here. And it just doesn't make sense in my head how we're not on a par with that.
No, and if you look at how long they've been going at that for, though, over the last few years, they've got a paid professional structure delivering it. I was the first CEO in ice hockey, and that was in 2023. And, we've still only got 4 full-time staff. If you look at Hungary as another emerging nation, they've got 25 full-time staff, and they've got 4,000 less registered members, but the same amount of clubs. So they're kind of equitable in that sense. Similar world ranking for the men, and they're operating with 6 times more people than us. So we can't, we can do the very best we can, and we can probably just about keep it going. But we're never going to impress our members to the level and serve them to the level that they should be, let alone start looking at how we're going to produce 2 Liam Kirks a year rather than 1 every 15. Because you talk about NHL drafts, you're absolutely right. I think it was 23-24 season, there were 88 European drafts. Obviously, how do we not even get one of those? And it's quite clear, obviously, Liam going so early to the NHL, although he didn't play a game there, but then being around that environment with the best coaches, the best analysts, the best environments, competing against the best players in Europe, in terms of his development, that is so important for GB. And if we had 5-10 Liam Kirks, you'd see a consistent World Men's Pool A team and an Olympically competitive team. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've brought in the foundation, which is privately donated to by a very generous donor who wants to see the sport grow and believes in the mission, believes in the merger. But that's really to just start to bridge the gap. And that's, you would have seen today, we announced Ewan King as national goaltending manager, and also Furhat as the membership and growth manager. That is free resource to clubs. That's all it's about. It's filling a gap where clubs can choose to use them or not. I think you've met Kevin. Kevin came up and spent some time with Billingham. He was very impressed by how you guys operate, which is why I know even more about you than I should. How you use your ice time, everything. So, but if you want elite goaltending advice about developing goaltenders in your junior academy, that's your resource. We couldn't afford them at Ice Hockey UK because of the budgetary constraints I've already spoken about. So until we get the merger over the line and until we receive more public funding, we've had to go out and basically create a foundation with a private investor who wants to see youth hockey develop, which is why we brought over Kevin from obviously the USA, where they understand how to strategically produce NHL stars.
Yeah, excellent. Carol, do you want to jump on?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken there about the NHL partnership and with the ball hockey, and you spoke there about the goaltending, the investment in goaltending, coaching, etc., etc. I just wondered what other initiatives you see that we can get underway to boost even more participation amongst not just the youth but women in British ice hockey, and how you would see success being measured in that area.
Yeah, so I think, and I've mentioned this a few times on public record, our investment in women since I've joined is 170% up. Okay, now that's great for GB women, and it should never have been. I should never have had to have done it. It should have always been there, but because they hadn't had that paid leader to oversee it, it didn't happen. But they're now equitable to men in terms of how their equipment, their expenses, all that kind of stuff, right? All the basics that should have been there in the first place. That should trickle down. We should be investing in the women's clubs more. If we look at our Olympic opportunities in 2030, the belief is that the women have a greater chance of qualifying than the men. Now, that may or may not be true, but we should definitely invest in the women even greater, but over a 4-year period. As I've been saying, it shouldn't be year to year. The Olympic qualifying last year wasn't budgeted for. So we did as much as we could, but ultimately we hadn't planned that over 4 years, over a 4-year cycle. So, but look at the talent coming through in the under-18s who won gold. We've got a really good group in around the sort of 23 to 27 year age bracket as well, who will be in the prime age for the 2030 Olympics and the campaign. So 100%, I would see investment more into the women's game. We look at the fan base, 45% of the elite league are women as well. We've got a really unique sport in that sense that's seen as like, obviously they're going to watch men's pro sport, but 45% of the audience feel as comfortable and as listened to and as respected in that environment as men, as it should be, but unfortunately it's not another sport. So we've got a really marketable value there, along with the social impact of the sport and how it can change lives if we broaden the base and we make it cheaper. That I think will grow the women's game. And I've met with members of the women's team about creating a brand specifically for the women, like the Lionesses, but something that is really marketable, because we were quite close to doing a documentary on this with a mainstream TV station about 6 months ago, and it may come back round, but the timing wasn't right, around the growth of women's hockey. And that for me would have been major, because we need to start getting ourselves outside of the hockey bubble in terms of PR purposes, for things that aren't just negative, like the Financial Times interview. I mean, the article absolutely ridiculous, and it's like stuff like that. We only ever seem to get mentioned in the mainstream news when it's negative or a tragedy. There's never any hockey rumors or signings or anything about the quality of the businesses. Like, you talk about your small level, like the way every hockey club is run, like financially, to keep going for you guys, I think it's like 50 odd years is the same franchise, and longer. Like, that is so unique. So we've got a really good ecosystem. Like I said, there's enough money in the system, it's just badly spent. And I think for me, it's important that it's equitable between men and women, because if we get one team to the Olympics, whether it's men or women, the whole thing changes. That's when kids watch us on TV and they see it as like an aspirational sport, and the public funding goes through the roof, because the elite level of public funding, if you look at the funding awards I spoke about, there's sports on there that you would never have even considered that get so much money. And I'm not knocking those sports. They do a great job in terms of winning medals, but that's the point. Those at that level, the sports are funded for medal capability only. So you'll get rowing. I think rowing get 15 million. And that's because they might go to Olympics and win 5 medals. But we get 900,000, and we're not going to win a medal in the next 8 years. So we need to shift it. And in the meantime, we need to develop more players and create this women's brand and market it outside of our current audience.
Do you want to follow up on the times thing, Carol? Because you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, obviously, I had a bit of a rant about that on the podcast when it came out anyway. And you mentioned about we only seem to get coverage when something negative's happened, or something like Petr Cech moving clubs. I've noticed he's got a little bit of traction this week, but that whole controversy around the Financial Times. I mean, we as part of UK ice hockey know that it is an inclusive and welcoming environment, but from somebody outside looking in, how do we promote that, not just to women but to other underrepresented groups in the sport? Because we're reliant so much on mainstream media, and yet they seem to have such a negative opinion of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Petr Cech thing is because he was a footballer, right?
Yeah.
So it's still really a football story.
Yeah.
But the Financial Times thing, like, we need to put that aside because it was so bizarre and distasteful. I went at it on social media non-stop. I went at it with the editor. They eventually changed the title after the pressure, but still didn't apologise that the title was a lie and that the whole thing was effectively fabrication of whatever narrative they were trying to spin. But I think that there's different, like, to your point, like I'm, in my football life, we used to give away 400 free shirts to kids of a certain age. I think it was year 3 in the local community, and it was a big investment. But you know that as soon as a kid sees ice hockey or buys the shirt, they're hooked. And that's the key, is like when those kids are starting to form their opinion on what sport they're going to follow, ice hockey has to be in the conversation. And I think ice hockey is sort of almost like dominated and kept going to the level it's reached by hockey families. Like, if the mum likes it, the dad likes it, and the kids play it, and like, that's brilliant. But to really broaden the base, we need to get people that wouldn't even think they would like ice hockey to come and watch a game, because I've never met someone that's been to a game who said that wasn't unbelievable, because it's got something for everyone. You don't have to understand the sport deeply to know that it's one hell of an experience. So I think getting those communities that don't typically watch it just to come along to a game, whether that's free tickets, whether that's doing the NHL Street program, because part of that, and this will come to Billingham probably in 2027, is the clubs are delivering it. Okay, and the reason for that is this was an example from us that if the sport works together, everyone benefits. Because start from the top. If in 15 years we hope that someone comes through this program is our captain. Okay, so they're 10 now, and they're going to be 25 then. Below that, the clubs are delivering it. Okay, so we're starting off with 6 pilot cities in the Elite League. Their players and coaches will deliver it in local schools and community groups. The benefit for them is that these kids who've never thought about playing ice hockey, and their parents who maybe wonder what their kids are going to be into and where they can take them at weekends, they will get a certificate at the end of each program they go through in their local club, run by their local players and coaches. And that certificate will offer 2 free tickets or whatever the club wants to give as a sort of gift and a well done. Okay, so those kids will come and watch a game. And for us, we want them to become players. If they don't become players, we want them to become fans. Okay, and that's how we broaden the base. We need to get people to games, but we have to incentivize them to come to a first game.
Yeah. Jono, do you want to come on?
Yeah. Sorry, just thinking about that. I was just going over my thoughts of that times and how much it actually hurt me, and because of my friends in the sport. But you mentioned obviously the Olympics, and it's going to give a different audience because it's on TV. Is there any plans to try and get our sport back on telly? Because you can't find it anywhere unless it's on a huge their own team's YouTube channel or anything like that, which is a massive shame. Obviously, we had Nick Rothwell on the program yesterday. He used to be one of our commentators for the sport in the UK when it was doing really, really well. But it's kind of like fell off a cliff when it comes to watching. And some of the sports I see on TV, and I just shake my head. I'm thinking, we have packed houses up and down the country, yet we're not getting any sort of coverage whatsoever.
Yeah, and it's a tough one for me to answer, because I know some of the reasons why it's not on TV. And I guess the Elite League would be the typical one that would go on TV, right? But they're affiliated to Ice Hockey UK. We deal with a number of things around there. Obviously, their governance, their DOPS, their imports, their all that kind of stuff. I'll come back. You mentioned imports earlier, so I will come back to that. I didn't ignore it. It was in a long waffle that I went off on, but I'll come back to imports. But yeah, it's their decision ultimately. But I think we can definitely get a highlights. We should definitely get at least a highlights show on terrestrial or whatever we call it now. And we should definitely be looking at free-to-air streaming as well. I know other sports are doing that, because otherwise the only people that are going to pay £15 to watch a stream are people that love the sport, right? Especially when the stream is not TV quality. So I agree. I think GB matches, I've mentioned this, and it may or may not happen, but we're as close as we've been in a long time. If we get Canada over here, one of the reasons that I've told Canada that we would need 18 months notice is we want to put on the very best show for them possible. And we want to make sure that we don't just play them and probably lose, but hopefully, obviously, we'll show really well. When we did in Prague, we went 1-0 up, and everything was incredible. And we lost 4-2. It was an unbelievable performance. So we don't want to put on great performances in a game that will likely not win. We want to make sure that wherever we go, we leave an impact, right? And that's why I talk around equality, social impact, the NHL Street program. If we're going to go and play one game in Sheffield, one game in Manchester, we should be there for a week before, in schools, in community groups. Canada are very up for this as well. They would help out with signed shirts, signed sticks that we can auction. They will help out with, community groups coming to the game and meeting the players, like all of this cool stuff. We have to think more than just it's a really good hockey fixture. It's a really good hockey event. And we have to show that ice hockey has a much broader power than that. Like, you're going back into that equality and social impact. Like those, at Forest Green, our authentic value was sustainability, right? Our chairman is one of the most prominent environmentalists in this country, whether you agree with his views or not. Like, that's how he is, and he's like black and white on it. He's that focused on it, which I have so much respect for. Whatever people's views are, if they believe something's right and they stick to it, So that's what we delivered. That's what we turned into a very profitable business and a very high performing underdog team. In ice hockey, it's not sustainability. We are working with rinks at the moment to introduce solar, which will save, I won't say which rink, but one rink will save 1.5 million in energy over the course of 10 years. Okay, so 150 grand a year. And then our job is, right, we've done that, put that back in the members' pockets, or give kids free ice time, or clubs better ice time, whatever it might be. We have to make running rinks more viable so that more people build them or more people want to own them. I forgot where I was going with that. That was it. So yeah, we're not going to be the greenest sport on earth anytime soon. Like, if it was, I could market that until the cows come home, which is a bad example. But we have to be authentic at what it is. And for us, it's our sport is really unique and special in social impact and equality. But we have to talk about it more. We have to talk about it to a broader audience. So if we play Canada, let's use that as like a platform to talk about those things. And we should be there for a week before, 3 days after. And when we leave that community in Sheffield and Manchester, we should won the hearts and minds of the media, the schools, the councils, the whatever. And that takes the whole sport, right? And could we play a game on the ice before Canada play GB for the juniors or for the clubs or whatever it might be? So everyone needs to take some shine from that. So I think I answered your question about TV a very long way around. I think we will get to TV at some point, but it might be that it starts with GB. But to get GB on TV, as much as I'm excited about Murrayfield and obviously the warm-up games versus Italy, it has to be something that mainstream people understand, and they understand Team Canada.
This episode is brought to you by Thor's Ice Cream, the best ice cream menu in Billingham. Find them at the rink on game days and pick from their range of amazing desserts, including the Biscoff brownie and the famous whippy trays, with a choice of amazing toppings. Supporters of the Stars and Buccaneers and proud partners of STARCAST. Find Thor's Ice Cream on social media.
The reason I ask is obviously the NHL played an absolute blinder this year with their Four Nations, and they just whacked it on YouTube for free. Mm-hmm. And then Canada and USA delivered that game that I think will be talked about for years and years and years. And I think people are just cannot wait for the Olympic gold final next year, because I think everyone's anticipating. And it just got my thoughts going, would I sit and watch Steelers versus Panthers on YouTube for free? And I think I wouldn't. I think millions of others would as well. So that was my reasoning for that as well.
It's absolutely right. And I do think we'll get there. But I hate the word, but politically, for reasons that wait along for this podcast, it will take longer to get there than we would hope. But I think in the meantime, if we can get a Team GB versus Team Canada game in the UK, I think we would have a real chance of getting that on a mainstream station. Imports, I don't even come back to that, because honestly, I'm not trying to ignore anything. If I don't answer a question directly, tell me. So I've got a sore throat, which is why it's like a bit scratchy. I don't usually sound like this. So imports, so we've made it clear to the Elite League, and the relationship with the Elite League now compared to when I walked in. When I walked in, it was quite obviously and publicly like that, right? We work very closely now with the Elite League. I understand what they say, that there's not been enough British talent coming through, but then our British talent does need somewhere to go and play and develop. Okay, so it's like chicken and egg. We can go around this for ages and no one really wins. The Home Office, who we work with, and Ice Hockey UK will not increase imports again. It's only going to come down, right? And that's a government directive. So we need to stop saying that it's their fault, our fault, whatever. And we are now working with the Elite League on a couple of very clear plans to reduce imports by producing more consistent British talent. But the Poland example, and that was another way for us to do it whilst we were having those discussions. There were players that went to Poland that don't play in the Elite League and stood out. Okay, so I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some movement there, and also some movement in this World Championship squad or next World Championship squad with new names and faces, because that's part of what we can do at the moment. But imports are only going to go down. The Elite League are being very receptive to our suggestions now, and we are working closely. We've got Todd Kelman, obviously on the Ice Hockey UK board, who I speak to regularly, Tony Smith, who I speak to regularly, and their approach now is very collaborative. But at the end of the day, they're a commercial organisation, so they won't take a risk on that, which I respect. But they also realise that if you produce Robert Dowd and then they get Robert Dowd, he's going to be their best shirt seller. And it's the same with, there's so much value in a John O'Phillips or a David Clark or Robert Dowd or whatever, because it's the hometown boy done good kind of thing, right? You get it in football as well, like a Steven Gerrard or I was going to say Gary Neville, but didn't sell shirts, but like a Steven Gerrard type thing. It's like people like that. They like to see one of them, right, playing. And they're going to stick as well. Like, unless they go to the NHL or Europe, they're going to stick in that club or within the elite league. So the lifetime value of that player to the league is far greater than an import that comes in for 2 years, sells a few shirts and goes. So they understand that, but it's a more longer term vision. And I think in the past, because I saw UK and elite league like that, no one was looking at the longer term. They were just like arguing about imports year to year. And that's a common theme that I've seen. As I said, people haven't been planning for 4 years, 10 years. They've been planning for 1 year.
Yeah, just a sidebar on the elite league. Obviously, they're not directly involved in the merger, but I would guess that they would be involved and a kind of an interested party.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. They've obviously got no voting rights directly, but we've got a quote of support from them. I know they're very keen on it because it's our best chance of producing even better British talent. So they're very supportive of it. They would the way that we're run now and the conversations we have with them and the progress we've made on even having 2 international tournaments in a season. I mean, I still think there should be international breaks, and that's the conversation we're having with them. But whilst there's not international breaks, GB takes precedent. So, but we also want to be respectful to them, and it worked this year because this year we didn't want to take the same squad away 3 times. It doesn't really benefit anyone. So this year, it was our suggestion that we'll take 2 different groups. We'll give new players an opportunity, and obviously they can play through. So they don't get a vote, but they're very supportive, and we've got a quote that we'll release at some point, along with any other letters of support that we received. I think we've got about 10 letters of support from different sections and groups within the sport so far. So we'll release that probably in the next week or so.
Excellent. Carol?
Yeah, I just want to look ahead, I guess, post merger, and genuinely, I'm very firmly putting my nailing my colours to the mast here. I'm very positively hoping for a merger. But what will success look like for you for Ice Hockey UK on the international stage post merger?
It's a really good question. I think firstly, we have to all leave a legacy. This isn't about me or the boards or anyone. Like everyone who's got a vote in this leaves a legacy on their time in the sport, and legacy can be points, goals, whatever, but actually the merger is the biggest legacy we can leave because it leaves the sport in a much better place, and then we can all work together collaboratively, and that's the biggest shift the sport will see ever. And then that does give us opportunities to start thinking about how far can we go internationally, how far can an IHL 1 go, how should the league structure look in 10 years time. Like we can all have a voice on that together, rather than operating in silo. But I've been quite clear. I think the conversations with UK sport around Olympic funding in the future, I think the women could qualify in 2030. I think the men could as well, but I think the women, their trajectory and their age profile, with a few tweaks to how they operate and how we support them, they could qualify in 2030, and I think they could be medal competitive by 2034, 2038, depending on how the rest of the world goes. But the gap between GB women versus Canada women is far smaller than GB men, Canada men, just because of the sport is obviously in the men's game is so geared by money, so you get a lot less for every pound invested. Whereas with the women, as we've seen with the increase that we've made, they've now recorded their highest world championship performance, and we're that close to getting to the Olympics. So I think the women can become consistent Olympic competitors definitely by 2034, if not by 2030. And the men, I would expect to be Olympically competitive from 2034. But 2030 is now out of the question because look at the last campaign, obviously they came up against, I think it was Denmark and Norway and Japan, and they all brought their NHLers back, right? And like as soon as they did that, it was like, okay, we've still got a chance. We proved it, how competitive we can be at the World Championships with Pete and the guys. But imagine if we had 5 NHLers to bring back as well. Like, well, why shouldn't we? We don't need to produce 5 in 1 year. We just need to produce 5 over the next 15. So I think, to answer your point, I think the women can be at the Olympics by 2030, if not 2034, and the men will be 2034, but maybe 2030. And then we've got to make sure that that's our focus, not World Championships. World Championships are like a tracking point of how well we're doing.
Yeah. Jono?
Yeah, mine's probably more of a moving back into the past. So when you first looked at the role and first seen the role, Henry, what was the biggest positive or the thing that surprised you most about British hockey?
Well, I've been to watch quite a few games, but like I was in football, so like my weekends were pretty much taken for 5 years. So I didn't get to much of that. So I sort of understood the atmosphere at games. But I think what I've been most surprised by since we're coming out, the Financial Times article, I don't want to keep giving them airtime, but the one thing they did was prove what I found since I've been here, which is, like for a sport that is as big as ours and is well attended, like it's still like at the right times it feels small, and I feel like they picked on the wrong sport. They picked on the one sport that cares so deeply about their sport and is so protective over it, rightfully so, that literally everyone who had a social media account just went online. So that's the thing I love, is that like we're small enough to be able to support each other and are that proud of our sport. We all invest so much money and time in it. Like you don't get that in other sport, but then we're big enough to be attracting the numbers we're attracting. And I think both of those are massive strengths. And neither of those I was fully aware of from the outside until you get into it. And the only negative thing I could say is like the way, and this is why we keep talking about the merger, right? Like I have got more to me than my character and my personality than the merger, but that was the bit that was the only negative. I was like, I get why it's like it has been, based on the history and based on the lack of strategic thinking and all that kind of stuff. But my God, it could be so much better. Like, and everyone knows it. Like, I've never come across anyone yet that doesn't want the merger. That's what like almost is a bit blindsided, is like in 3 years, I've never come across someone that doesn't think that one governing body properly run makes less sense than 3 governing bodies, and 2 of them don't receive any public funding whatsoever. So there's no grassroots funding in ice hockey anywhere. Like, we are the biggest sport to receive no public funding for grassroots hockey. For grassroots. And like, how can that be right? And that's based on the history, obviously, of England, England's board and their governance, and it's based on, obviously, Scotland do a great job, but they're volunteer led. They're nowhere near the governance standards that are required to be investable for public monies. And you can fix all that in one go. Otherwise, you're going to be talking another, I don't know how long.
Yeah, I mean, just about yourself, Henry. You talked about how the sport can kind of grab people. Do we have you as a committed hockey fan now?
100%. And my son, I mean, my son's got absolutely no interest in toys or football or anything, which makes, like, best kid in the world, obviously, but it's quite unique to find a kid that doesn't like toys. And he's only 3, but he can openly admit, so he's 4 actually, 4 2 days ago. But when I first took him to watch ice hockey, he just sat there and, like, first time he's ever sat still. He just sat there and he was captivated by it, because, and I think adults are the same. You don't have to understand it to know it's like a really good experience. Like because it's something for everyone. I always use the analogy. It's like, and this is how we should market it broader, by the way. It's like the best second date you can go on. It's, you don't have to, like, you can talk, you can drink, you can watch really impressive people do things that you couldn't even think of being able to do. And it's got the Americana around it. It's got all the stuff, between periods. And obviously the Zamboni going up and down is the highlight. apparently to a 4-year-old. But yeah, I'm obviously a massive fan. I live for the sport now. But yeah, the fact it had that effect on him, and then you look around and you see people holding up 6-week-old babies, like you don't get that in any other sport. In front of 8,000 people, and you've got a 6-week-old baby being held up in a safe environment, and kids in pajamas who will go home straight to bed. Like that's how sport should be. It's still got the tribalism at even the top level, where it's a bit more, I guess, polished, because it is any top level. But you've still got the tribalism between fans, but it's like a healthy tribalism. It's not, they're not punching each other outside the arena. I think that's what makes our sport really unique, and that's what gets the 45% of the audience, I think, being female.
Yeah. Fab. Anything else from Carol and Jono?
Yeah, but kids in pajamas is no way to talk about Sheffield Steelers kit, by the way. I've got just one last question. I know you've got your coffee morning tomorrow, so perhaps this is a pertinent one. If you could ask the ice hockey community just one question to kind of guide this next phase of the sport's growth, what would it be and why? That's 2 questions, actually. Sorry.
So repeat the question so I get it exactly right.
So if you could ask the ice hockey community just one question to help you guide this next phase of growth, what would it be?
Now, I'll probably give an answer now, and I'll think later and think, actually, that wasn't the top one, because and that's why I'm doing the thing tomorrow. And that's why I do this podcast. And that's why I put myself out there on social media, because I genuinely want to hear everyone's perspective on things, because I don't see everything in the sport. I hear about things that matter, but I don't see everything, because the sport's so varied, right? At the different levels and the different corners of the UK. I think we're the only sport that has, in a professional status, that has a team in every one of the 4 nations. So I don't get to hear about everything, but I like hearing people's perspective. I don't think I'd ask them the questions that I know the answers to. I know what concerns people. I know what annoys people. I think I'd just like to hear and this is what I put out earlier. I want to hear people's ideas, because obviously I think about it all the time. My colleagues think about it all the time. But I'm sure, in the different corners in Billingham, in one of the junior teams, someone's got an idea we haven't thought about. We might think we know every idea. We might think we've thought of everything, but someone gave me an idea the other day from our board, actually, who's not, he's a massive Cardiff Devils fan. I won't say who is, but very, very bright guy, travels everywhere with the Devils. And he came to me with an idea that I hadn't thought of. And that idea on its own would be financially transformative for the sport, but it requires a merger to do it. Once you've merged and you implement that idea, suddenly there is another, probably shooting myself in the foot with this, because I can't tell you what the idea is, but I want to be as open and transparent as possible. There's probably another 500,000 a year going into the GB pathway, which we're going to extend down to under 14 with the merger. So the pathway will be under 14, which means it's free from 14 up, because I've always maintained that once you become a GB player, doesn't matter what age, we expect you to act like professionals. We need to treat like a professional. So you get your clothing free, you get the right nutrition, the right everything. The ice time, obviously, and coaching is free as well. But that one idea, I thought of everything, and he gave me that idea, and yeah. So I would like to genuinely hear everyone's idea, and if I could just get everyone to send them in, I would love to read through them. Obviously, they've got 14,000 members, so I don't I wouldn't be able to do it, but just even if one of those ideas is transformative as that one, I know how I can move the pieces around to make it happen post merger. So yeah, that would be it. I want people to everyone's so proud of their sport, and people are always thinking people are always finding negatives about it. You're doing anything, right? But what's the solution to that?
Yeah. And Henry wakes up tomorrow and the bubble next to his email icon on his phone reaches 14,000. Jono, any last thing from you?
Yeah, I'm going to try and ask a question from a fan point of view where there wouldn't be maybe as invested as probably what our 4 are, and it's more along the lines of players leaving to go to other clubs. And Billingham have got a rich history of developing great players. Steelers captain, GB captain is one of our own, and we certainly shout from the rooftops about it because we're proud of it. In the last couple of years, we probably lost 4 or 5 players that have gone on to bigger, better things now. everyone says the easy option is for Billingham is to move up, but you need £500,000 to do that. So is there any way that a club like Billingham can be, rewarded for producing this sort of players? Because we could have probably went on and won our division for 3, 4, 5 years on the bounty if we kept all these players, and that means our fan base probably grows and we earn more money. So you could argue that we've lost out by these players moving on to bigger and better things, but you're never going to hold them back. But it's just what's in it for it's a bit of a crap question, really. What's in it for us to produce these great players?
No, it's not a crap question. It's a question that I know the answer to as well, because I've thought about it and I've suggested it a number of times. I'll take one step back because it kind of relates to Carol's question earlier, but like the way that we elevate the women's game up here in terms of GB is we've already got a club system that has ice time, that has the equipment, that has the coaches, that has the knowledge. Can we invest directly in the clubs? And we've got the foundation now with national goaltending manager, Kevin is head of hockey development. There's about 4 more people being announced in the foundation that are free resources to clubs. Why don't we elevate those clubs? That's where the GB players play typically. So if we improve their standards of strength and conditioning, their facilities, their nutrition advice, their coaching levels, that elevates everyone, the coaches, the volunteers, everyone, right? So that's on the women's side. I think we should be investing directly into clubs. On the men's side, obviously, it's a much bigger section. What I've always proposed is, I mentioned it earlier, if a player goes to the NHL, that is so valuable to GB because of what I mentioned, the environment they're in, and effectively what happens is the NHL do your job for you. Okay, you've developed them to a standard that they have got the potential to play in the NHL. The NHL then invests all of their time, expertise, etc. in them, and the player gets better, like way quicker than we could produce them once they turn 18 in this country. If they play in the NHL or NHL 1 or even Elite League, they'll develop, but they're not playing alongside the best players in the world. So, like, getting a kid drafted the NHL is transformative for them and their family, but also the NHL will do the best job of anyone on the planet in developing that kid over the next 2 to 3 years. So I think, and also that there's a payment from the NHL for a development fee to the nation, okay, and that's why the nations have much better resources than us, because 88 players are going there, and there's a lot of money coming over from the US. So I think there should be some kind of development fee for clubs that play a part in that development. And it could be, and this is the kind of thing we would figure out with clubs in those 12 months is, we'll say there'll be a development fee. How do we split that between clubs? Is it based on the amount of time they were there? Is it based on what age they were there? That's the kind of discussions that we want to have with clubs about how it works. So I 100% agree. If you produce players that are good enough to either represent GB for, say, 50 caps, there should be a payment. Or if you are at the highest level able to produce a player that goes to the NHL or the DEL or whatever it might be, then there should be a different kind of payment. So I think absolutely we haven't got our own facility. We haven't got a centre for excellence. We haven't got, and that's not going to be built for a long time until we get this NHL stuff to force people to build things and these energy costs brought down with the solar we're installing. But in the meantime, we should be elevating our clubs, which is what the foundation is all about, and which is what the merger is all about, because then you've got one set of staff in the office looking at the sport from grassroots to elite, one strategy, one approach, one culture, one set of standards. At the moment, it's very fragmented. But yeah, I think we should be basically paying back based on results. It's that brutal.
Yeah. And obviously with the Billingham hat on, if that could be backdated to when did Dowdy think to about 2000, that would be fantastic.
That seems reasonable.
Just as a roundup then, Henry, if you can give us an idea of the timeline over the next few weeks of what's going to be happening. Obviously, people will keep an eye on social media. Obviously, the respective media teams of all three organisations have been doing a lot of work to keep people informed. But what sort of time are we looking at over the next couple of weeks?
So, obviously the 17th of December is the respective EGMs for SIH and EIH. So they'll be held back to back over the course of an evening. There's obviously certain vote thresholds in there that need to be passed. And I hope it doesn't end up this way. I hope that we all come together and we can start the calendar year 1st of January, 31st of December, working with members across both nations to obviously put the detail on this and get it over the line. But if one organisation merges and the other doesn't, that's okay. It's a democracy, and we will work with that organisation. So that's what happens on the 17th. And like I said, I hope by the end of the year the sport truly comes together and we can start planning the future in a much more positive fashion with everyone. Prior to that, there is still a number of virtual town halls and meetings that we're doing. I think we've got NHL 1 and 2 tomorrow. So that'll be good. And yeah, there'll be probably a daily social media post from the media teams that you mentioned. So there'll be more of that. And then we'll release the 2 promises that I mentioned as well, alongside, we've obviously already done officiating. We'll create a full-time head of officiating role. And then we'll also release one on DOPS, and we'll also release one on member voice and influence, because I think like I want members to be like, hopefully it's clear from this and clear from everything I talk about, like members are the lifeblood of obviously our sport. I don't say that as like a throwaway comment that I guess any typical CEO would say, but like in ice hockey, it's more apparent than anywhere. All right. So we want members to have a real voice at the board of the one big NGB. But how it's set up at the moment is not as effective as it could be, because the sport's gone through so many different changes. Like it's not modernized. It's not as beneficial as it could be. There's been articles on articles and policies. Like, just reset them. Like, what should the sport look like against these guiding principles and these promises? And how do we make sure that members are told and heard on the issues that are generally going to directly affect them on a week-to-week basis? So that's what we're doing over the next couple of weeks. So then obviously we'll see what happens on the 17th.
Yeah, no, it's exciting times. As I say, we've been through it before. We don't want that again. We want the positive result. So we'll look forward to following encouragingly from afar. Really appreciate your time coming on tonight, talking to us here on the STARCAST. Hoping you've informed and educated to a wider audience from the NIHL. So thank you for that. Enjoy a coffee morning in the morning. Hope you get a good turnout popping in for a brew. And we'll catch up with you again, hopefully, in a positive light in the new year.
Cool. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching and listening to STARCAST. Follow us on social media and remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform.